Welcome to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Cuello, and Caritas is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and global healing. And we do this through online presentations and interviews with guest speakers, as well as classes and study groups. And we draw from a wide assortment of both ancient wisdom and leading edge studies in science and consciousness and spirituality and philosophy. And we've been doing this since 2003, but it was only in 2020 that we began recording our presentations on Zoom. When the pandemic hit, we went all virtual. So our video recordings are viewable through our website, and we have about, I think, 90, maybe somewhere around 90. Our website is caritascenter.org. And on our YouTube channel, Caritas Consciousness Project. And as a nonprofit organization, we rely on the support of our members and donors to keep our program going. And if you enjoy our presentations and would like to support the program, you can make a donation or become a member by going to our website. And now let me introduce tonight's guest speaker. Joseph Selbie enjoys making the complex and obscure simple and clear. And he's the author of Breakthrough the Limits of the Soul, of the Brain, which is this book here, which I finished today, and it was absolutely wonderful, just really fascinating. I highly recommend it. And there were other books too, one on the Yugas and one on the physics of God. And the physics and this brain, this book, Breakthrough the Limits of the Brain, is all about how neuroscience supports spiritual experience. And the physics of God, a unification of science and religion, and the Yugas, a factual look at India's tradition of cyclical history. Oh, good. He's known for creating bridges of understanding between the modern evidence-based discoveries of science and the timeless experience-based discoveries of the mystics. A dedicated Kriya yoga meditator, for nearly 50 years, he has taught yoga, meditation, and universal experiential spirituality through the US and Europe. And in 1975, Joseph became a founding member of Ananda, a spiritual movement inspired by the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, author of Autobiography of a Yogi. His role as teacher and minister and decades of study under Swami Kriyananda, Ananda's founder and direct disciple of Yogananda, gave him a deep dive into Eastern philosophy and meditation and comparative religion. Joseph appears with Elizabeth Rom in the 2014 Ananda docudrama, Finding Happiness, which showcases Ananda Village, one of the most successful spiritual communities in the world. From a family of scientists and engineers, Joseph is a critical thinker grounded in fact-based approaches to discovery. He studied physics, chemistry, and microbiology at the University of Colorado. His presentations and classes, articles, and books have always blended science and spirituality. So you are a walking convergence of spirituality and science, which I love. So welcome, Joseph, and thank you so much for making time to be with us tonight.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So I'd like to start at the beginning with how you became interested in this kind of dual discipline of science and spirituality, and and what led up to your writing these books?
Well, as you mentioned, and as you were telling everyone about me, I really grew up in a family where science was, the last word on anything that was being discussed. And as I like to joke, when we had family discussions over the dinner table, it was important to provide references so that whatever you were saying had credibility with particularly my father. He was a very strong-minded, scientific-oriented man. And I did well in all science education and took me into the University of Colorado, fully expecting to have a degree in science. I got interested in microbiology, in physics, the usual courses in math. But then in the middle of my years at the University of Colorado, I had a profound hallucinogenic experience, which really changed me deeply. I had already been kind of open to spirituality and had been, in fact, already meditating. But that experience was so strong that it really set my feet on a lifelong path of wanting to have that kind of experience, not just in a extraordinary evening and all night, but all the time. And I had enough perspective on the experience to realize that it wasn't the particular drug that I took that was the key. It was that this experience was innate to who I am and to who everybody is. And the drug just gave me a glimpse of that potential experience, that potential consciousness. So that led me kind of inexorably to becoming a part of the Ananda community, becoming a student, disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. And I have been that for almost 50 years now. I've lived at the Ananda Village and other locations that Ananda has developed over the years since 1975. So it's been the core, the center of my life. But at the same time, I never stopped being interested in science because it was so much a part of me in my growing up. And I love the clarity and logic of scientific thinking. Now, science has a bias, which is peculiar to something that should be just based on clarity and logic, but I'll get to that in a minute. So science as a process is what I continue to admire. The conclusions of scientists generally are ones that rule out spiritual experience. So I had to, work out in my own mind how it was possible that they could look at those discoveries and determine that they were proof that there was no higher consciousness. They were proof that God could not exist, when I could look at the same discoveries and see the presence of the divine working through those discoveries, which is, really what I will get to here as we talk about how to break through the limits of the brain. But in terms of my own personal journey, I saw this duality. I saw that while science is considered to be proof of the lack of higher consciousness, I knew that higher consciousness existed because I had experienced it personally, and I had studied the lives of many, many great saints and sages that left me in absolutely no doubt that higher consciousness exists. So I dove into science anew, if you will, and looked at it from the point of view of, well, what in it does support the presence of consciousness, that does support our own higher potentials. And I was wonderfully pleased to find, complete support for a view of consciousness as being infinite and not limited to the brain, that our own senses are only showing us a part of a picture that we can actually see much more deeply when we get beyond the senses. All these things played a part in my personal journey, but then also as I had the opportunity in my after my retirement from a business life and semi-retirement from various things I've done here at Ananda Village, gave me the opportunity finally to write these books. So that's how I got into it. And also a big factor in my interest was the fact that Yogananda was embracing of science, which you might not expect from an Indian yogi who was, came to the West when he was comparatively young, but his formative years were in a culture completely non-Western and completely not science-focused. But if you read the autobiography of a yogi, which I imagine, let's see a quick show of hands. How many of you have read the autobiography of a yogi? I see 2, 3, 4, and there's probably more of you out there that I can't see at the moment. It has become what's known as a spiritual classic and has been a nudge for millions of people to go deeper into their own spiritual lives. And in the autobiography of a yogi, he devotes 2 entire chapters to discussing this connection between science and spirituality. One about Jagadish Chandra Bose, who was the Nobel Prize winner and developer of many, many instruments that allowed him to study a plant's reactions to various things like chloroform or like being cut, that he showed this boundary between animate and inanimate was really not so clear of a boundary. And then in a later chapter in the autobiography, Yogananda talks about Einstein's theory of relativity and how that is a foundation for understanding how miracles can be performed and the consciousness of masters who can perform them. So this was, freeing, wonderful discovery for me to see that I could embrace deep spiritual truths and embrace a spiritual life and make that the center of my life without having to give up the scientific side of me, without having to give up critical thinking, and without having to just deny everything that science has to say, but rather I could look at it and embrace it, but then use it as a foundation for showing how spirituality is very much congruent with science.
They're not mutually exclusive.
They're definitely not mutually exclusive.
Although many scientists would say, yes, they are. Right?
Well, unfortunately, as I alluded to several times, the current scientific perspective on reality is, ironically, a belief system.
Mm-hmm.
They are dismissive of religion for it being a belief system not grounded in any reality. And as I say, ironically, they have their own belief system. And their belief system is simply put that nothing exists that isn't matter or energy. That is their bedrock belief. Matter and energy, according to that perspective of what's known as scientific materialism, is, according to them, able to explain every phenomenon in reality. But it doesn't. And what it does to a lot of scientists is that it forces them to dismiss out of hand more subtle levels of reality, particularly consciousness. That's maybe the frontier between science and spirituality that is uniting to them, as we know, but the scientists who have to embrace scientific materialism can't go there. There was a Pew study done in, I think, 2008, 2010, somewhere in there, that asked scientists what their beliefs included. And 41% basically said their beliefs were scientific materialism. But 51% said they believed in God or a higher power.
When I read that, I was really amused.
Yes.
How can they resolve that discrepancy?
Well, I think what they've learned to do is, I don't know, when any of us come together with a family gathering and you know there's a family member who is just not going to want to hear what you have to say, you're not going to bring up something that they consider completely off the wall or, particularly in the realm of politics, you just don't say anything, right? You just keep your peace. And I think for a lot of scientists, they just keep their peace or they keep their job by not ever bringing up the fact that they also embrace higher consciousness, even though they work professionally as a scientist. Mm-hmm. So that is another irony of all this, that even though scientific materialism and most of the kind of mainstream assertions of what people refer to as science are materialist, nonetheless, not all scientists are materialistic. They don't all believe in that belief system.
Right. And especially quantum physicists.
Yes, that is, I think, an area in which science as a discipline in scientific materialism kind of loses its grip on reality because of what's known as, quantum weirdness, which it doesn't actually have to be quantum weirdness when you understand the fundamentals a little better. But quantum weirdness is things like entanglement and the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where at quantum levels, and this is really a way of saying when matter is studied at subatomic levels of size, it stops behaving the way matter does that we perceive through the senses. So we might intuitively, or just because of familiarity, expect matter to behave in a certain way at a tiny level because it's the way we see it behave at a bigger level. So the uncertainty principle, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, is that at those tiny, tiny levels, when you examine something like a quark, you can only know at one time with certainty half of its properties. You can know, for example, where it's going, but you can't know how fast it's going. Or you can know how fast it's going, but you can't know where it is. And this is not the way we experience the material world, right? If I were to toss somebody a baseball, they would know both where it is and where it was going and at what speed, and they'd be able to catch it. So this is our common sense, born of the senses experience of matter. But when you get down into these tiny, tiny subatomic particles, they don't behave in the same way. And that's what's known as quantum weirdness.
Right.
So scientific materialism is, in a sense, an extension of that common sense way of viewing matter that comes to us from our senses. And when it goes beyond that, scientific materialism has a hard time of defining it and understanding it. So that opened up the door for people like Niels Bohr, who's considered the father of quantum physics, and Heisenberg and Einstein, to make statements like the foundation of matter is consciousness, because it made more sense in that era to think of a more subtle layer of reality underpinning this strange behavior of quantum weirdness. And I think for a while, most scientists were open to that. And it was only in the 40s and 50s, and certainly by the 60s, that perspective that consciousness existed as a foundation of all reality was essentially poo-pooed by the majority of scientists, because they couldn't find the kind of objective proof for its existence that they could for other more material things. And so it's not so much that they disproved it, in all honesty, just they didn't want to talk about it anymore. They didn't want it to be this perpetual sort of drag on the discussion. They wanted to just have it be neat and tidy, matter and energy explain everything. But still, on the frontiers of quantum physics, you will continue to hear this discussion of what is reality, for that matter, not just, is it consciousness, but what underpins all of these weird behaviors of energy.
You have a quote in your book by Abraham Maslow that says, where he says, the story of the human race is the story of men and women selling themselves short. Would you talk about that a little?
Yes. Well, my opening chapter in this book, Break Through the Limits of the Brain, is titled, "We Are So Much More Than We Know." And I enjoyed writing this chapter because it allowed me to put into it some of the very solidly proven experiences, or experience told by very prominent people, that throw away this limitation of materiality and throw away our limits as human beings. So one that fascinated me, 40 years ago or 45 years ago when I first read it, was that Charles Lindbergh, who most of you probably have heard of, was famous for his flight from New York to Paris in a solo flight in an airplane. He was the first one to do this. He became an international sensation as a result of it. He was known for his scientific background, his ability to not only fly this plane, but practically help build it. He designed it, etc. But in his book about his flight, he told this amazing story about an hour into his flight, which lasted, I believe, 30 hours, thereabouts. He began to get incredibly sleepy. He had been working really, literally night and day for weeks to get ready for this flight. He was kept awake most of the night before his flight, talking to people. And so when he took off, he was sleep deprived. An hour in, he described his eyes as feeling like salted stones.
What a nightmare.
But for him, to fall asleep was to die.
Mm.
It was that stark. There was no way that he could expect his plane not to just crash into the ocean or to fly off course if he were not fully awake and paying attention. And he fought sleep, and he fought sleep for several hours. And he fought so hard that he finally went into an altered state of consciousness. And his awareness became spherical. He was aware of things behind him as well as he was of those in front of him. And he became bodiless as far as his experience was concerned, had easy flow of energy, was awake in a way he had never been awake before. Beings came to him and talked to him and encouraged him in his flight, during his flight. And it wasn't until he was almost to his destination that this state of consciousness went away, and he came back into his body and back into his ordinary conscious awareness. And I've read a story, I don't know that it's true because I haven't backed it up, but I read a story that when his book was first published, his biography, autobiography of this, his life and this flight in particular, that he included that story, but that in later editions it was taken out because it was just did not fit people's conceptions of what this, rough and ready American flyer should experience. And there's another story that I tell in this first chapter about Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell was one of the astronauts in the Apollo missions. And in his particular mission, when he was coming back from it, he was gazing out, whatever you would call it, the window, the porthole of the capsule, looking out at what must be, a deep field of stars when you're out in, the nothingness between the earth and the moon, where there's no outside light. And he was so captured by what he was seeing that he went into an altered experience where he felt himself to be one with that infinity and beyond the little body that he was ordinarily connected with. And when he came back to the States and eventually retired, he founded what's now known as the Noetics Institute, IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And it was his purpose to apply science to understanding why and how he could have had that experience, because it was so profound and life-changing. And there are more stories. I don't want to tell them all to you because that's all we would have time for. But the power of the stories that I chose them to kind of shake people, myself included, into not being lulled into thinking that what you experience through the senses and what your body allows you to feel and experience is all that you are. In fact, it's a tiny part of what you are. You are so much more than that. But we tend to not know it because our brain prevents us from knowing it.
Yes, talk about that, how the brain filters so much out.
It doesn't actually filter it out. I get the net result you could call filtering, but it's more that we program our brain without realizing we're programming our brain, without realizing that we're wiring our brain to focus our attention on what the senses show us. So it's almost like being blinded by a light, right? You can't really see anything else but that light. But a vast reality exists beyond that light that is shining in your eyes. Our brain has been wired to do that to us, starting when we were babies. There is a fascinating kind of factoid that human babies are the least able to take care of themselves of any animal born on the planet. That almost nothing that a baby is born with is instinctual. It does have some instincts, but they're very much, you see or read or watch videos of animals being born, like colts being born, and they stand up and walk and run in minutes after being born. This is because their brains are pre-wired with those abilities, where our brains aren't. And so we have to actually wire all the circuits necessary for us to walk and to talk and to understand speech and to interact with other people. And this is the main job we have from being babies till when we're 3 or 4 or 5 years old, when we have those circuits. And in the process, we literally wire billions of circuits that enable us to do those things we take for granted every day. The ability to walk, to move your hand, to pick something up, to correlate sensory information with how you should move and what you should do. And it's second nature to us, but it's second nature to us not because nature gave it to us, but because we wired the circuits that allow us to do that. And I don't know, you often run into this thing where people will say, well, I recognize so-and-so by their walk. And we all walk in unique ways. And we walk in unique ways because we wired our brains learning to walk in unique ways. We didn't necessarily wire our brains in the way to walk. We wired our brains in a way that worked for us to walk. And that may leave us tilting forward a little bit. That may leave us, with our feet widespread, with our feet pigeon-toed. All of that was the result of us just learning what we needed to learn in order to walk and function in the world. But then we went on not only to learn how to function physically in the world, we went on to wiring ourselves for emotional reactions to the world. We liked some things, we didn't like others. And the wiring of liking something would make us get interested in having more, whether that be food, a different person, a particular kind of music, whatever it was. There are literally millions upon millions of things we've wired ourselves to be interested in because we like them. But we've also created avoidance wiring, so to speak, for all the things we don't like. And we do this to such an extent, have done this to such an extent, that, sad to say, and I include myself in this description, most of us get up in the morning, have circuits start firing that lead us through our entire day until we go to sleep. And that we are responding to cues from our environment. But those cues trigger circuits that we've wired in the brain, which determine how we react to them. Now, we're not automatons. We can at any time, at any moment, say, stop, I'm going to consider how to react. I am going to choose what my reaction is to this, and you can do it. But as soon as you stop paying attention, your circuits kick back in and you react just the way you would if you hadn't paid any attention. So that wiring that we've all done for our brains with good intentions and with lots of practical usefulness has left us essentially blind to deeper realities. Now we can rewire. That's the good news. We can rewire our brain by doing things like meditation, especially, but other activities that will wire our brain to make us aware of these bigger realities. But if we don't make that choice, we will be blind to the broader reality, that the greater part of who we are, that has been described by psychologists, by spiritual teachers, as a superconscious awareness, of an awareness that goes beyond sensory awareness. It's ours to have. It's innate. And as a believer in reincarnation, I know that if I don't achieve that superconscious awareness this time around, I will eventually, because it is who I am. It is innate to all of us, is that we have this superconscious awareness. But in this lifetime, for whatever many reasons, we have chosen to not be aware of it. And that gives us a life that is hard to resist, because we tend to fall easily into those habits of reaction. But it's also a perpetual opportunity to go beyond them. So that's why I say you have to break through the limits of the brain. It's not a title that's not entirely true, because the limit is not so much inherent to the brain as it is that we created a limiting brain by our choices. But you still have the same task ahead of us, of all of us, is to make conscious choices to wire new circuits that will make you aware of superconsciousness.
So if I have a very bad habit that I want to break, how do I rewire the brain so that I don't respond in my accustomed way of responding?
That is a great question. And neuroscience, modern neuroscience, has given us some very good advice for how to do that. It's not creating a magical formula that you can just, do tomorrow and a habit goes away. But by understanding the power of the circuits that we have, you can begin to understand what you need to do to get past a circuit you don't want and develop a circuit that supports what you do want. I often use the notion of a coffee drinking circuit. So a lot of us drink coffee and a lot of us like coffee. And if it's something that you do a lot, you will tie to the core circuit of, I want to drink a cup of coffee. You will tie to that memories, thoughts, and feelings that are awakened by their own circuits. So your coffee drinking circuit becomes interconnected with other circuits. And the longer you are a coffee drinker and the more you like it, the more of your other circuits that you built for other reasons are connected to your coffee drinking habit. And there is a saying in neuroscience, which is that Neurons that are wired together fire together. And what this means in essence is that if any of those circuits that you've developed over the years fire, everything fires. So a particular memory can make you oddly, perhaps it's not a direct memory of drinking coffee, but it's a memory that's associated with your coffee circuit, and it makes you want to drink a cup of coffee. And you may not even realize it makes you want to drink a cup of coffee. So our habits, often the ones that we don't want, but even our good habits, are strong because they're supported by hundreds, even thousands, even millions of other circuits. So this is what we're up against, wires, neurons that are wired together, firing together. Built this circuit. We've done a really good job, right, of building a very responsive, strong circuit. But now we don't want to do it. Now we want to give up drinking coffee. So what do? Well, you have to take the lesson in that process and apply it to a new circuit. You have to build a new circuit that becomes as strong as the circuit you no longer want. Resisting a circuit, as we've all experienced, and as Mark Twain put it very humorously, giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world to do. I've done it myself 1,000 times, right?
Yeah.
That we've all run into this. You think you've made some headway resisting one of your circuits. And metaphorically speaking, you look away and that circuit reasserts itself. The old behavior comes back without you, even realizing it. Fighting a strong circuit that you've developed over perhaps decades is nigh onto impossible. You have to have a very, very strong will to overcome it directly. But indirectly, anyone can do it. First, you have to figure out for yourself what is a new behavior that you feel positive about that you could begin to develop. So maybe with the coffee habit, it could be exercise. Maybe exercise for you is the key to not wanting coffee so much. You tend to want coffee because it gives you that adrenaline lift, but you have noticed in your own life experience that exercise gives you that same kind of lift. So let's say that's true, and you want to develop your exercise circuit to counteract it, sort of draw the mental neural energy away from that coffee circuit and into this new circuit. So you build it consciously in the same way that you built the coffee habit unconsciously. You start exercising, obviously, but then you associate with exercise things that are pleasant. You get to finish your exercise by having a smoothie that you really love. Or you get to finish your exercise with, a hot tub. I'm just making things up here because I don't know what you in particular obviously would find attractive, but all of us have things that we find attractive, and you begin to associate them. So the good news is that you have to build as strong a circuit or multiple other circuits as the one you're wanting to avoid, the what draws you into that behavior, like drinking coffee. The good news is doing it consciously, you can do it much faster. You can build a circuit consciously much faster than you inadvertently built the circuit that you're wanting to overcome. Be methodical. Expect it to be hard at the beginning. Write it down. Don't underestimate how strong this habit is going to be and how easily it will reassert itself into your behavior. Write it down. Be really committed to whatever plan you come up with. You can allow yourself some failure points. If not, your commitment can be too brittle. You can be disappointed. You can become hard on yourself. You can start to define yourself as a person who can't overcome habits. Give yourself some leeway for your occasional lapse to have that cup of coffee. But keep affirming and literally affirming, which I can talk about, that new habit is going to be your new habit. That new circuit is going to be one that you're going to build, and it's going to be there for you for the rest of your life. Yeah. And the more deliberate you can be about it, the more aware you can be of your behavior. It's good. It's very good to develop a habit of introspection. Ask yourself at some point in the day, typically the end of the day works for most people, but it can be any time. Ask yourself, how are things going right now? In terms of my habit, am I building the new habit that I want, or is the old habit still taking over my behavior when I don't want it to? And be aware, be conscious of how you're actually behaving. Be non-judgmental towards yourself. It's really important to be non-judgmental towards yourself. Even if the habit that you don't want is one that you find, distressful. That you fall into it. Don't judge yourself. This is something you built by accident.
Yeah.
I have had some initial behaviors that were fun that led you into it, but essentially it was by accident. Go ahead.
When I was in my early 20s, I wanted to give up smoking. I had been smoking. I started when I was 15, and at this point I was about 21, maybe 20 or 21. And but I didn't want to make it. I didn't want to make it a willpower thing, because I was afraid that if I made it a willpower thing, that if I failed, it would be so much harder to try again the next time, right?
Right.
And so what I did was, every time I lit a cigarette, I would tell myself, one of these days, I'm just not going to want this anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to wake up one day and know that I'm not a smoker anymore. And until that time comes, I'll keep smoking. But I know, because I want to stop, I know that one of these days that's going to be the case. And I did that for, probably, I don't know, a couple of months or something. Mm-hmm. Every time I lit a cigarette, I would think, okay, no, this probably isn't my last one, but one of these days I'm going to not want it. And one day I came down with strep throat, and it was too painful to smoke unless I didn't inhale, and that was no fun. So I just couldn't smoke, right? Uh-huh. And I thought, because it was just like fire in my throat, and I thought, okay, well, maybe this is the opportunity that I've been waiting for. And I knew that it would probably be a week or more before I would be able to smoke again comfortably. And I thought, so when I get better, I'm not going to want the pack of cigarettes that I had when I started, because they'll be stale. So when I'm better, if I really want it, I will go out and get a pack of cigarettes. But I'm hoping that this is my opportunity, and that by the time a week of not smoking rolls around, I won't want it anymore. I won't be craving. And if I'm not craving it, I won't get another pack of cigarettes. And that's how I stopped. Because at the end of that week, even though if I thought about it, I would say, oh yeah, I'd love to have a cigarette, but I wasn't craving it. And so I thought, okay, well then I'm going to hold off. And then that's it.
Well, I think you in a way built another positive circuit by your conviction and your repeated affirmation that this is going to go away. I don't know when, I don't know which after which cigarette is going to happen, but I know it's going to go away.
I didn't know enough to replace it with something else, which would have been a good thing, right? So if I do want a cigarette, I'll just do this instead, right? I didn't know enough to do that, but it did work. So that was. So I agree.
Affirmations are very powerful. It's part of the various tools that I discuss in the end of the book. Affirmations are like direct ways to create circuits. Behavior is an indirect way to create a circuit. So you can actually go out and exercise, or you can do whatever it is you would like to do as a new behavior, and that will build a circuit. But an affirmation that you love to do it, or an affirmation that I will exercise, and I'm just making this up, this may not fit anybody else, but I love to exercise because it puts me in touch with the cosmic energy in my own being. And I am that cosmic energy. So the affirmation can become part of something deeper, a deeper truth than just the specific behavior you might be wanting to develop. And that has power. One of the things that I discuss in the book is you should always think about, if you're going to embark on self-improvement, what particular self-improvement would give you the most for your effort. Because a really strong, positive, good habit will pull you in the direction of other good habits, and vice versa. So that's one reason to develop it. But then there are what you might think of as supercharged circuits you can develop, superconscious circuits you can develop. And the number one circuit, number one behavior, number one experience that I recommend for everybody universally is meditation.
And that is, somebody put in the chat, Joe put in the chat, would you talk about the creation of new habit of daily meditation? And I also would like to add, talk about how justification kind of feeds into this whole scenario of creating new pathways.
Clarify for me a little bit what you mean by justification in this.
Oh, context. You talk about how you talk about the effects of justification on neural circuits and also on the life force, but we haven't gotten to the life force yet. But justification like, well, I can't meditate today because I've got this appointment, or I'm too tired, or, the justification talk about in the book.
Okay. So developing a daily meditation habit, I think, is the single greatest key to self-transformation and to experiencing more and more of your superconscious self. It isn't something necessarily that happens right away. There are sort of examples of beginner's luck. People sit down to meditate for the first time and have a really amazing experience, which sort of catapults them forward in their habit of meditation. But even if it's not a deep experience, even a few weeks of meditating regularly will give you some benefits. You'll feel less anxious. You'll feel more energy. You'll feel greater mental clarity. And you may also begin to feel a presence, a greater sense of awareness, of a reality beyond the one the senses are telling you about. And this is the key. But meditation, like any other practice, needs to have a good, rich neural circuit set built around it so that it becomes a very strong habit. So even on the mornings when you get up and you don't want to meditate, you do meditate. That's the proof of a solid, positive habit, is that it will draw you into doing the right thing, even if you're resisting it. So some of the ways you can develop meditation is to make sure that the environment in which you meditate is something you like, is a nice place. So you can theoretically meditate anywhere. You can just sit down on a kitchen chair and you can meditate. But better is to have a place you meditate regularly, because then that starts to, when you see it, that triggers the thought, oh, I can meditate, I could meditate. And the more attractive it is to you, for whatever reason, for me, I put a picture of Yogananda on my altar because Yogananda is my spiritual teacher. And so that picture is very attractive to me. But it could be other things as well. A lot of people like to, have scents. I can't do scents because they make me sneeze, but whatever works for you, make your meditation place. And if you can have a meditation room, better yet. But that place could be, a closet. It could be a utility room. Make that area something you like to go to, and that makes you feel good when you get there. Develop the habit of listening to uplifting music before you meditate, or listening to chants, spiritual chants before you meditate. Those two, whenever you hear that kind of music you play before you meditate, or the chants that you listen to before you meditate, they trigger the meditation circuit. They trigger the meditation memories. What you're doing is you're consciously building experiential circuits that include emotion, perception, memory, and you're associating them with meditating. And the more deliberately you do that, the stronger you can make your circuit. And the more it too will deepen. The biggest draw to, I think, most people for meditating is the memory of experiences that you had while you meditated. It pulls you back into it because they're very attractive experiences. So the more you meditate, the more you will want to meditate, and the more you actually do meditate. So build the circuit deliberately. Know that it's going to be challenging to build any new habit, to build any new circuit for weeks to months. The reason why most of our resolutions to create new habits fail is that we don't stay focused on them long enough. 3 weeks go by and we think, this is happening. And then there's sort of a false confidence that comes along, and you think, well, I could skip it this morning. Oh, well, I should take this phone call. This email is attractive. And before you know it, you've missed 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And that habit that was going so well, that was beginning so well, doesn't solidify into a lasting circuit that helps you meditate. So stay with it for weeks to months until, as I say, the desire to meditate will overcome the resistance to meditate, that it becomes strong enough that you will do this at whatever time you've chosen to do it regularly, because you really know you will do it. You're muted, Gloria.
I am. Yes, I am. I'm sorry. Each time we do it, doesn't it give us a little shot of dopamine?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And that's one of the things that the brain provides to support our strong circuits.
Mm-hmm.
Dopamine does lots of things in the overall brain chemistry, but one of the things that it does is it reinforces pleasure. So if we feel pleasure in what we're doing and we feel intense pleasure in what we're doing, dopamine will kick in.
Or accomplishment.
It can be anything that gives us pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be sensual pleasure, but just anything gives us pleasure will be amplified by dopamine. And the more often we do it, the stronger that dopamine support is. But eventually, a circuit like meditation can become beyond the necessity of dopamine to come in. Dopamine is kind of a cheap high, where what you can experience in meditation is deeper and more satisfying than what dopamine will give you.
Yes. Okay, so we have another question from Tink. Oh, wait, what happened to it? I saw it a minute ago. Oh, here it is. She said, I think you're talking of neuroplasticity, and of course we are, in terms of the circuits and neural pathways. If so, can you speak to the correlation of this with consciousness?
Not sure, Tink. I totally follow your question. But to start with neuroplasticity, let me just say, yes, I am talking, when we talk about creating any kind of new circuit in the brain, it's possible because the brain is inherently plastic, changeable. A single neuron can put out essentially like other little feelers to other neurons, up to 10,000 other neurons to create new circuits. Now, the circuits that we've developed don't necessarily die away, but the number of connections they have start to erode. So our whatever habit it is that we no longer wanted and successfully managed to avoid because we created a new habit, it starts to just break down a little bit. But they're sneaky. If it was a strong habit, it can sneak up and grab you without, your conscious awareness really easily. They do have long lifetimes. But more important is the fact that we can create the new ones with this neuroplasticity. Mm-hmm. So in one sense, I'm not sure where you wanted to go with that question, Tink, but in one sense, we can direct neuroplasticity because we are conscious. Go ahead, Gloria.
I'm just saying to Tink, she could unmute and ask and clarify.
Joseph, what was the last thing you said? I missed it.
Oh, just that it's because we're conscious that we can work the fact that the brain is neuroplastic. I mean, we are not our brains. We are entities that are immortal, are infinitely conscious, have infinite feeling. And because of that, we are really in charge of what happens in our brains, even if we're not doing it deliberately. It takes a conscious actor for this neuroplasticity to change the brain. Otherwise, like most animals, we would act just from the pre-programming that we were born with. And we would act instinctively all of our life, whatever life form we happen to be. But eventually, animals become more and more conscious. They incarnate as humans. Humans become more and more conscious until we take more deliberate charge of what we want to experience. And that's when our consciousness, our ability to focus our consciousness, it uses the innate neuroplasticity of the brain to our own purpose. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I was just thinking healthy brain, more consciousness, kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. That's what I was thinking. It just seems to me that neuroplasticity just makes for healthier brains.
Well, it opens the door to healthy brains, but unfortunately, the same ability that you or I have to sit down and meditate and have superconscious experience and build neural circuits, it's the same ability that a meth addict destroys their brain with. Because it's a conscious choice. It may be a completely ignorant, self-destructive, driven by emotional demons choice, but that path down to becoming a meth addict has the same effect. It builds circuits in the brain that want you to take meth. And in fact, because meth has such a powerful pleasure experience, it builds those circuits really fast and it laces them with dopamine responses. And this is why meth addicts become, so tragically rapid train wrecks of human beings. But it's the same ability. It's consciousness. And luckily, most of us are propelled into lifetimes where we already have good karma, we have good desires, we have the deeper than conscious desire to grow in positive ways. And so we have a head start in our life towards creating a healthy brain. But the brain is just a tool. The brain itself is not healthy or unhealthy. The brain is a reflection of what we want to do. Now, there's a hidden brain, if you will. There's the part of the brain that is the autonomic nervous system that keeps the heart functioning in rhythm with breath, that allows us to, process and digest food, etc. There's a kind of like a silent partner nervous system that we have that we don't really change its circuits. Fortunately, we can't rewire the autonomic nervous system because in our kind of innate desire to experiment and try new things, we would probably kill ourselves.
Yeah.
So, but all the other circuits in our brain that have to do with, conscious behavior are at our disposal, so to speak, our neuroplastic disposal to be wired in any way we choose.
And,
Thank you.
a major spiritual experience like the one that you had, or, through whether it's through meditation or through a psychedelic drug or whatever, can have a very powerful immediate effect, and life-changing effect,
Right.
which is, eliminates all the struggle to create new pathways, because it in itself, a profound experience of the divine, let's say, does change those circuits, right?
Right. Yes. And that was, I sort of alluded to it when I mentioned meditation being the one habit that I encourage everybody to have. What I didn't finish in that thought was the reason why I encourage it is because in meditation, you can have these spiritual experiences that more rapidly rewire your brain.
Yeah.
They're supercharged with divine power. And that divine power, in the same way that the negative flip side, the same reason that the meth addict develops the circuit so fast is because they're so pleased by it and dopamine kicks in. On the positive upside, when you have spiritual experiences, you're so drawn to it and so uplifted by it that those circuits are reinforced rapidly. And, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the various stories told by near-death experiencers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the common themes that you will hear is that when they returned from their near-death experience, they felt like new people. Yeah. That a lot of psychological and emotional conflicts that they went into their death experience with, they came out without them. Mm-hmm. Because their brain really was rewired deeply by that experience. And although their lives didn't change so much in an outward sense, most of them, not all of them, but most of them stayed married to whoever they were married to. They went on with lives that included the same friends and children. But their whole view of what they should do while they're doing all those things completely changed. And they realized that the only purpose in being alive is to learn to love and to be of service to others and to, feel the connection to the divine. And they didn't have to build that circuit. Right. They didn't have to overcome the tendency to resist being loving and resist being, preoccupied with things that are of less importance. They were remade, and that became their life, was giving, loving, serving, and without any fear of death.
Right. Yeah.
So powerful experiences definitely rewire our brains more rapidly.
Yeah. Tanya was asking, what is your understanding of circuit creating with social media use and possible cause of depression in teens?
Yes. Social media, a powerful force for good, a powerful force for bad. Mm-hmm. And it's also, online tech in general knows how to build circuits in people's minds really rapidly. Mm. So I thank my lucky stars that I raised my kids before social media came along.
Me too.
I honestly don't know how I would have combated the downside of social media without alienating them from me. Mm-hmm. And as I say, I thank my lucky stars that I didn't have to do that battle, but it's very attractive. And because it's very attractive and very easy to do, and it's very repetitive, it can build circuits in moments, practically.
Yeah.
And teenagers who are still building their life circuits, right? They haven't
And
built
still
all the
building-
ones that we have as adults.
Yeah, and still building their self-esteem, and where peer pressure, is so important, more than any other time in your life, I think.
Yeah.
So it feeds right into that. It's very insidious.
I think the challenge for parents is to learn how, and it's a fine art that I can't tell you I achieved great heights in, but it's a fine art. I see it in parents whom I admire, is the ability to engagingly win children to positive behavior, so that you don't have to keep after them. They want to do things that are good for them. And by making their positive things such a strong part of their life, the negative things are less able to affect them. You have to be an engaged, loving, active, interested, energetic parent to do this, I think, all of which is hard. Being a parent is one of the great growth experiences of anybody's life, because you really don't start off as a good parent. You don't start off knowing what to do. You don't start off knowing all the skills that you need to be a parent. And if you end up a good parent, it's because you've grown a lot.
That's something that has to change. We need to incorporate that kind of training into our education system. Training on how to become a good parent, training on how to have good relationships. None of that is really taught.
It isn't. I mean, it is taught, but there's 1,000 ways it's taught.
Very indirectly.
Well, some are many of them are good, but none of them become in the popular mind, the way.
Right.
It doesn't have the gravitas as being, the best way to be a parent. Instead, there are 1,000 different ways to be a parent, and I don't know how that's going to change. I mean, changing society is something that I don't even try to do. I try to model good behavior. I try to model the behavior that I think would be beneficial to everyone. I talk about meditation as often as I can. I encourage people to commune with spirit and let the power of spirit filter into their lives and everything they're doing in their life and change them for the good. But frankly, I don't have any good ideas about how you actually go out there and change society other than by modeling. I mean, you can have a particular thing that you do. Ananda is really devoted to meditation. And I think we have taught something in the neighborhood of 2 million people how to meditate. And we give support in many, many ways for people to meditate. We have a meditation app. We have, refresher courses. We have different techniques we teach. So in a sense, that goes beyond modeling, but it doesn't have power if you don't model it.
Right. Do you teach meditation to children?
Yes, but very carefully, because they're naturally drawn to it, but they're naturally, their brains aren't formed, their circuits aren't formed in such a way that a discipline about any one thing is natural to them to build. So again, you have to make it something they like to do.
Yeah.
Keep it light. Keep it enjoyable. Let their natural spontaneity as a child take them naturally to spirit and to connecting. But I think if you come down too heavy-handed on children,
No, that doesn't work.
like preschool, kindergarten, elementary school children, you will often just make them not want to meditate for the rest of their life.
Right. My daughter had a summer camp. She ran a summer camp, designed the program and everything. And she had quite a range of ages from, like 4 to 13 or 14. And so it was, she was very good at what she does. But anyway, she, when they would get rambunctious and, too scattered to kind of get them all involved or engaged in something, what she would do is she would take them outside, and right outside the facility where she was teaching or holding the camp, there was a big field and woods, surrounded by woods. And she would take them into the woods and she would say, find a spot, any spot, just find your spot and sit in it. And until, I blow the whistle, and she would allow 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to just observe from sitting in that spot, see how many things you can observe.
Mm-hmm.
Little bugs, little leaves, little shoots coming up, whatever it is. See how much you can observe. And they would do that. And then they would come together and they would talk about, each one would tell what they had observed, and they loved it. And it would totally calm them down.
Right.
And that was, and they would often say, can we do that again?
Right.
Can we go to the woods again? Because they loved being in the woods and just watching life, yeah. So that was a very effective tool that she had.
A good friend of mine, Joseph Cornell, wrote a book called Sharing Nature with Children, which has been used by the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, parents groups, Sierra Club. And it was really embraced as a wonderful tool for engaging children in nature. And what you described is very similar to one of the exercises he has in there. But if you are a parent and you have children who need calming, nature is a wonderful way to kind of center them.
And it struck me as a kind of meditation, not closing your eyes and going inside, but you're focusing in such a deep way that normally you don't, right? As a child, right? So I thought that was pretty cool. So could you talk a little bit about superconsciousness and just how accessing it, what you mean about accessing superconscious awareness?
Well,
meditation.
Sometimes the word sounds daunting, or maybe even unwelcome, that you would suddenly be super conscious, and that might imply to you that you're no longer a human, you're no longer normal, you're no longer the person that you are now. But really what I mean by superconscious is that it's anything and everything beyond the consciousness that we live in day to day that is stimulated by the senses. So when we get sensory information, it triggers those circuits in the brain that we've developed that trigger behaviors that keep us going through a day from when we wake up to when we go to bed. But all of us also have superconscious experiences, and we don't often think of them as that. I mean, the most common one is that we get a hunch. And we sort of know that something is going to happen, and it happens. And it's not out of the blue, at least typically not for me. It's more a hunch about something that is unfolding in my life. So I know the actors, I know the character, I know the situation is going on. And I think, I bet so-and-so is going to go this direction or do that. And it's not a guess, because I feel it. It's qualitatively different when you have a genuine hunch. So when I have that, or any of you have that, you've just had a superconscious experience, because it is beyond your normal day-to-day consciousness that is provided to you by the mind when you're in sensory awareness. So we all have it already, and we touch on it. And in another real way, we couldn't exist without superconsciousness.
Right.
Superconsciousness is who we are at the deepest level. It's our soul. It's our divine nature. But because we've become so preoccupied with just a very limited view of that greater reality of which we are an essential part, when we meditate, that is one of the surest ways to have superconscious experiences. And simply becoming calmer, more interiorized, will help us touch into a different awareness, a superconscious awareness. One of the most rewarding ways that we experience superconscious awareness in meditation and beyond meditation, but particularly in meditation, is when we feel a sense of well-being, a sense of joy, of just happiness, disconnected from anything that happens to be going on in our life. It's not the reward of something that occurs. You just feel a sense of joy. And that is superconsciousness. As we get deeper and deeper into our meditation practice and touch into superconsciousness more and more often, speaking personally, what happens for me is that I'm much more intuitive. I'm much more creative. I'm able to focus in a way that brings ideas to me that were not my ideas, that were perfect for what I was needing to think about or do or accomplish, but they weren't the process of a rational one-step, two-step, three-step process. They came full-blown. The solution came complete in a moment of intuition.
Like a download.
It's like a download, yes. Or I'm uploading myself into that higher consciousness and meeting it. Yeah. My emotions are much more harmonious, and my impulsive tendency is more to give and to leave happiness behind me wherever I interact with people. I'm not being Pollyannish. I'm not thinking, oh, I should tell Gloria here what a wonderful job she's doing. I mean, that's great, and I mean that in a way, but I didn't just say it in a way that came from meaning, right? I didn't just say it that time in a genuine way. And so giving love and being of service to others is most meaningful to you as well as to them when it comes from genuine feeling and heart.
Authenticity, right?
Authenticity, yes.
Yeah. Being more authentically who we are.
And that comes from that superconscious experience. You no longer have to There's value to faking it until you make it.
Mhm.
There is value in doing things the way you wish you spontaneously wanted to do them, because they build circuits.
Yeah.
And those circuits start to support that behavior. But of more value to you is when, through superconscious contact, you genuinely, spontaneously want to behave that way.
Right.
And that's the power. And it feels wonderful. Superconscious awareness is just wonderful. It's joyful. Paramahansa Yogananda defined God. He said, God is, not God is sort of like this, not one of God's attributes is this. He said, God is ever new joy.
Hmm.
And when we experience our higher consciousness, it includes ever new joy. It super consciousness in a way is born of ever new joy. And that's why people talk about meditation as being blissful.
Mhm.
I avoid that term because it kind of got grabbed by popular society and is belittled. Like, oh, so and so's blissed out. They can't talk or behave.
Mhm.
But really, that's what it is. Ever new joy is bliss. It doesn't overwhelm you. It doesn't make you a non-functional human being. It doesn't make you unintelligent. All of that, ever new joy, superconscious awareness makes you more intelligent, intuitive, makes you more concentrated, more able to accomplish things. In my time now, after having built for decades greater and greater awareness, I'm 10 times, 20 times more productive in the things that I do than I was when I had lots of energy and lots of youth. But I was scattered much more when I was young. Now I'm centered in doing things much, much better. I don't want to put myself forward as a paragon. Things can throw me and leave me scattered still, but I can get back to that center more readily. And then in that center, I could live more fully.
Yeah. Wouldn't you say that part of that experience of, accessing or touching into that superconscious reality, one of the effects of it is to just trust our lives, trust the universe, so to speak. And in trusting, we don't get thrown off balance by every little thing, because it's just the next thing that has arisen, and it's okay. There's this trust factor, I think, that is so important.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to describe the same thing, but I'll use different words, which is that for me, I realized at some point, and not always, again, I don't want to make myself out to be a paragon. I go in and out of this kind of attitude and state of awareness and being. But on my good days,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I don't need things to come out in any particular way
Mm-hmm.
in order for me to be happy.
Right.
And again, it's genuine. I can trust that however they come out is going to be just fine. It's not going to take away my happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a challenge, even if people are being mean to me,
Mm-hmm.
even if disaster strikes me. I was about a year and a half ago, I was in an automobile accident, and I had a broken neck.
Oof.
And I was actually amazed at how little it concerned me.
Mm.
I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I didn't have the ability to walk normally. I didn't have, any ability to use my left arm and hand. And yet I was really, genuinely, I was suffused with this feeling of, I'm fine. Not that the situation is fine. I didn't pretend that the situation was fine, but I was fine.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I was fine because I didn't need the situation to have a particular outcome.
Right.
I could be fine in the moment. Now, I believe that part of my being fine, being calm, being centered and in the moment allowed me to heal more quickly than I might have done if I had hit the panic button, the
Sure.
internal panic button, and thought, oh my word, what if I'm going to be like this for the rest of my life? What if I'm going to be in a wheelchair? Fear was not what I experienced. And again, I don't want to set myself forward as a paragon where I thought, oh, I will resist fear. I just didn't feel fear.
Yeah.
The years of meditating really came to my rescue, and my connection to spirit and my connection to my spiritual teacher was there. And I got through it without feeling like it shouldn't have happened. It just happened. I mean, I still have things I'm dealing with a year and a half later as I very slowly heal from this spinal cord injury. So it's powerful. And once again, it's not powerful because I'm powerful. It's
Right.
powerful.
Yeah.
Superconscious awareness is powerful. And when you are able to be in it, then these kind of things happen genuinely, authentically, and naturally. And they improve every aspect of your life.
Yeah. Including relationships where we
I
have
think maybe especially relationships.
Yeah, where we have fewer expectations and
Yeah, and relationships are I think were, maybe to some degree are, but certainly were the things in my life that could most throw me off.
sure.
Or could be the most happiness producing. And so they kept me going up and down more than anything else in my life.
Eckhart Tolle says, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
they can push our buttons more effectively than anyone else because we care so deeply about them, right?
Yeah. Yogananda put it this way. He said, your spiritual development is tested in the cold light of day.
Uh-huh.
It's not just because you have a wonderful experience in meditation.
Right.
It's how you experience the challenging, Thanksgiving with the family and Uncle Ed. That is, and actually, I think that Thanksgiving with Uncle Ed is not as challenging as every day with your partner
Uh-huh.
or every day with your workmates. That's really where the challenges come. And again, bathing in superconscious awareness, filling yourself with ever new joy. Yogananda uses the term, when you go into meditation, you should saturate yourself with the presence. And then when you leave meditation, that can carry you through your day much better than if you enter your day anxious and nervous about how things are going to happen.
Yeah, I had a teacher who said, now go marinate after
Right.
after a good meditation, right?
Right.
I'll go marinate.
Yeah.
Let's see if anyone else has a question, because we have about 17 minutes left. So does anyone have a question they'd like to ask? And if you do, make sure your video is on if you want to ask it out loud, or if you don't want to turn on your video, then please type it in the chat and I will ask it for you. So
I don't quite, this isn't well formulated as a question yet, but I've been reading things about Jung and like the self with a capital S. And so I'm just thinking like, well, when I think of the ideal meditation, which I don't get to very often, I just think about meeting myself with a capital S, or where you're kind of getting to the essence of you. So I'm just wondering, like, how do you see the self with a capital S relating to superconsciousness?
So self with a capital S is a way of differentiating between kind of a lesser expression of our potential and our highest potential. We are always ourself with a capital S, and you see that in psychology. It's often used. You mentioned Jungian psychology. You know that a lot of people make that differentiation between self with a capital S and self with the smaller s. The way I understand it, and the way I approach it, is that I am and will be always the self with a capital S.
Okay.
But in every lifetime, I have a challenge to try to manifest as fully as possible the capital S me. And the result, until I am perfectly able to manifest the capital S me, will always be the smaller s me. But the potential is always there.
But is that the same as superconsciousness, like when you're in your capital S self?
yes.
Yes, you are superconscious. Again, we're always superconscious.
Okay.
We are just making choices to limit our awareness to a very relatively small arena of reality. But we're using superconsciousness to have that limited awareness, because superconsciousness is our consciousness. We can't be conscious without being inherently superconscious. But when we choose to kind of, like a camera lens, if we screw down the aperture of that camera to such a tiny degree that all we can see is a little bit of the field of reality, that's what we're doing when we're operating in our smaller S self. But we can't operate even as our smaller S self if we aren't a part of our larger self. We are our larger self. We're not a part of it. We are our larger self.
It's the reality of who we are, but we're not always aware of it on a conscious level.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was good.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? If not, I do. Just trying to give people a chance to ask their questions.
I see a symbol that says one hand is up.
Okay, let me see here. Oh, yes. Tanya, would you like to ask a question?
And hear you.
Hey, thank you. Great. It's interesting because I have I find meditation hard, in my day-to-day life, and I've never gotten really good at it. But I find that, I've been studying Thich Nhat Hanh and mindfulness, and I feel like mindfulness is like moment-to-moment meditation. It's like almost like meditation with what you're interacting with at the moment.
I agree with that.
That's my experience.
That mindfulness in the moment is I think, a wonderful experience, and I commend you for doing it. But I would encourage you to continue to try to meditate, because I think what you would find is that if you can get past the thoughts that tend to flow through our minds with astonishing rapidity and begin to calm thoughts and feelings down, and not only would that be a positive experience, but that you would then be more mindful during the day, that you would, again, sort of be authentically more centered than you might be otherwise. So they don't have to be either or practices. Being mindful is a wonderful practice. But I still encourage you to, maybe a way to put it is, a good meditation is concentrated mindfulness. It's like total immersion into mindfulness. And then when you come out of a really good meditation, the mindfulness, that the practice, the habit of mindfulness that you're developing can become even more positive for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's so many different kinds of meditation. There's so many different ways of meditation. You might want to just explore and see if one of them draws you, right? One of them makes sense to you. But I also think mindfulness is a very, very effective discipline. There's a question in the chat from Suzanne Price, who says, my question is to everyone. What is your view on mindlessness states to achieve connection with superconsciousness? Mindlessness states. I'm not sure if this is what you mean, Suzanne, but I'm wondering if you mean just shutting down all the thoughts, or at least transcending them, transcending the thinking mind.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Aha. Okay. Thank you.
Many people teach meditation, and they talk about mindlessness, not focusing on mindfulness. Right. So I was just wondering what Dr. Selby thought about that one.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I appreciate the question, because it does come up often, and it is sort of on the one hand, mindlessness sounds horrible to many people because they love thinking, they love their thoughts, they love their mind. And the way I like to explain it is, it's not so much mindlessness in the sense that you're not aware of anything. It's mindlessness in the sense that your thoughts and ideas and emotions are not allowing you to be mindful in the moment. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of a paradox, is that when you calm the things that normally fill your mind, you become mindful. On the daily kind of run-of-the-mill of thoughts, and you become full in mind, in heart. Some of it is semantic, right?
Yeah.
The irony, the paradox of it is, when you become mindless, in the sense that is generally meant when your thoughts subside and you calm down, you are full of experience. You are mindful in the centered way in which it is more important.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anybody else think? Oh,
there's
no,
that
Carol.
Waving hand up there.
Yeah, Carol, you need to unmute.
Yeah. Joseph, thank you for your wonderful ideas. I have to say, you've given me a lot to think about. And I love the idea I mean, what at least occurred to me when you were talking about the circuitry and the importance of desire, and we know that we are our motivation, we really change when we have a desire, to change, and the circuitry that builds circuitry, and so it kind of gives me a sense of a support system within myself and without myself to make changes. There's something that's very supportive about the idea of circuitry somehow.
I'm glad you said that, because I think that a lot of the kind of takeaway of brain circuitry is, oh my God, I'm up against all my bad habits have a head start on me that I'll never overcome. But the best takeaway about brain circuitry, and you can rewire it in any way you choose. And you can do it by just deliberate, methodical action, affirmation, meditation, and it will obligingly rewire.
Yeah.
When you really give it focus, when you really want to rewire it, it can happen fast. I said weeks to months, but it can be weeks.
Yeah.
You can really build a vital new habit in weeks if you put all of yourself into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to say that I've noticed recently that I'm reacting in a much more peaceful way to things, accepting way to things. And it makes me feel so good because it's progress I'm wanting to make,
right.
but I'm not as up. Things just don't upset me. And it's just like I feel like I've shifted gears, and it's just and maybe it's the circuitry that's working, but it's very wonderful to have a sense
That's great. I love to hear that. The circuitry works for you all the time now, right? Yeah. You've put all the time and care and energy into creating your behaviors that you want to have, and now your brain is supporting you in them every day.
That's
whether
what
you want to do them or not.
That's right. It's very uplifting. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that's a wonderful note to close on, I think. Is there anything in the couple of minutes that we have left? Is there anything that you'd like to add, Joseph?
I think I'd like to just emphasize the power of connecting to spirit. Mm-hmm. That, a lot of times I will say to people, well, I've been meditating for 40 years or 50 years. And they'll look at me like, well, that's pretty amazing. But then I realize what I've been doing for 40 or 50 years is connecting to spirit. Mm-hmm. And when I think of it that way and put it that way, people go, oh, that's a different story. And I can say with full conviction that it has been the single most transformative thing in my life, and it is absolutely wonderful. So I just urge you to make the connection to spirit. Mm-hmm. However you do it. You can think of it as spirit, which is somewhat impersonal. You can think of it as God, which is a little more personal for people. You can think of it as the Divine Mother, the Heavenly Father. The list is almost endless of ways you can think of that infinite, intelligent spirit that we are a part of. But connect
from the heart.
Connect from the heart. You can connect from mind and heart. Give it your all. Give it your whole being.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you very much, Joseph. It's been really lovely. I'm getting a lot of thank yous in the chat, which you can take a look at a little later. And I appreciate the time you've taken to talk to us, and thank you all for attending. And I hope we'll see you again, Joseph.
My pleasure. Happy to come back.
Okay. Do you have another book coming up?
Not soon.
Okay.
Not soon, but I'd be happy to talk about Physics of God, which is a very popular book. And for those of you who might like the notion of higher ages in the past, I have a book called the Yugas, cyclical approach to civilization that comes to us from India. So, pick a subject, honestly. I've been teaching about spirituality, meditation, yoga for almost 50 years now. And there are very few subjects that I haven't taught.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much. And we will see you again then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.